on the screen, and then the floor will be open for 5 to 7 minutes debating the topic on an open debate format. I will designate who will have the first response to the question. Canada's international role has been changing over the past 10 to 15 years. With particular reference to security and the environment, what does your party envision Canada looking like on the world stage, from Christian 2 in Toronto? And Ms. Kim start.
So in terms of the role that we have right now, if it were to continue, so right now we have a relatively small government, a very right-wing politics, and if it were to continue with, for example, the Liberty Party, our role would only worsen. I mean, currently, Canada used to be in the top 10 under the ranked countries in the world, and now our reputation is lowering. We were just awarded the Colossal Fossil Award for being one of the most destructive countries. So environmentally, Canada's reputation is diminishing. Economically, okay, yeah, it's doing well right now, but once our natural resources run out, we're not going to have anything. So we need to work towards shifting to a more environmentally sustainable future, because right now the way the future looks isn't too good for Canada in terms of environment and economics.
Yeah, as Kim said, our environment is absolutely suffering because of our priorities on the world stage. We think that Canada is the only country that has ever left the Kyoto Accords, which is very interesting because countries such as the United States never even joined the Kyoto Accord. Canada committed to something, and as Canada has wanted to do in the last couple of years, they have gone back on the word committing to this. We believe that on a global scale, Canada has a lot of responsibility and things to make up on its environmental side of the way it's treating, and the way that it's dealing with its environmental system and with its programs with the environment. And I think we need to stop cutting back and silencing scientists and be more open and more advanced in our environmental thinking.
We believe that the environment is not necessarily what's at issue here. The issue is that strict environmental controls can damage Canada's business standing on the international level. It can be bad for our economy. You say we're still in the top 10, although our reputation is slipping. Our reputation with who? If we allow these environmental restrictions to reduce our international economic standing, then we will drop out of the top 10. But for real, as opposed to simply being awarded made-up awards by various organizations that don't matter. The Kyoto Accords, in addition, are something of a sham, consider that many countries refuse to join them, and there are good reasons for their refusing to join, and just because one government committed us to an implausible accord such as the Kyoto Accord doesn't mean that future governments shouldn't recognize that that was a bad idea and try and leave the Kyoto Accord.
How is strict environmental controls damaging to our economy?
Because if you decide, oh, you can't dig out this oil because we're afraid that it might damage the environment later on when somebody burns it, then suddenly all those jobs from the oil fields and such are gone. All the money that could have come out of that oil is gone, and it's sitting in the ground doing nothing.
Okay, and we never said we wanted to completely eliminate taking oil out from the ground in Alberta. We're just saying that eventually, once the oil runs out, if right now we start investing in researching in renewable energy sources, by the time that oil runs out, we will have a good option for our environment and for our economy. I don't understand this notion that the environment and the economy, it's one or the other. They go hand in hand. The countries in the future that are going to be most economically successful are those that care most about the environment and that are environmentally sustainable.
Our immediate economic standing is not more important than our long-term environmental plan. Canada's strength is in its natural resources. If we damage our natural resources to continue the economic standing we have at the moment and not at all ever think about the long-term commitment or the long-term investment, that will be detrimental to our economy.
Especially stats show that by 2050, $21 to $43 billion will be put into environmental prevention for freak disasters. Hurricane Sandy happened, these freak disasters are going to keep moving north, they're going to become more frequent, and we're going to have to be spending money for prevention. I mean, it's a known fact that environmental disasters are going to get worse and more common and more frequent, so why don't we tackle the issue so that we save money in the long run?
But there's not necessarily a guarantee that these environmental disasters are going to move north. The environment doesn't necessarily work like that. Just because some condition may become worse in the long run doesn't mean that it will automatically start moving towards Canada. There is no guarantee that we will necessarily be hurt in the future by that sort of thing.
Are you saying that environmental disasters will most likely affect other people but not Canada simply because we're Canada? And we can't prove that it will affect us, so we shouldn't prevent them?
The point is, there's no sense preparing for something that is likely not to happen just because you're afraid of it.
If you're prepared for something, when it does happen, you are prepared against it. If you do not prepare for something, and by chance it happens to happen, then you're in a problem, you're in a crisis situation. It is better to prevent things, or to prepare for things that don't happen, than not to prepare for things that eventually do happen.
The question is it better to spend huge amounts of money on something that it never happens and your money's gone, or probably spend less money when it does happen?
I believe we have our differences, Mr. Granville.
Let's go back to the question about the world stage.
Canada on the world stage.
We believe that in the future, Canada's stance on the world stage will be improved economically by our policies. We believe that with the new loosening of restrictions, Canada will become a more attractive place for businesses, and that will improve our economic standing on the world stage.
We believe that Canada plays a large, or should play a large role on the world stage. With such a diverse and multicultural country, Canada is designed for peacekeeping, and that we believe that we should be continuing with the whole peacekeeping approach. We take pride in our land and our natural resources, and our plan is for Canada to rise to its potential and take control of its own future within itself and with other countries on the global stage.
We also take pride in Canada being a middle power and not being influenced by superpowers, so if Canada, for example, wants to intervene, we're not going to let the U.S.'s decision influence that. For example, in Iraq, Canada made a great decision by not following these superpowers, so Canada will remain its own middle power and not be influenced by other countries.
We agree. We think that Canada should try and remain uninfluenced on the world stage, and that. Well, we also believe that Canada shouldn't necessarily the government of Canada shouldn't necessarily interfere in the affairs of other countries, because just if we decide to intervene somewhere, Canada does not have the authority to intervene in other countries' affairs.
Who does have the authority to intervene in other countries' affairs?
They do, and if private Canadians want to go, and if private Canadians of their own free will want to go to that country and try and help, we think they should feel free to do that. We just don't believe that it's our government's job to try and do things in other countries.
We are not saying it's our government's job to try and do things in other countries. However, I mean, we do understand that sovereign nations do have the right to exercise control in their own states. We understand that. I mean, it would be a little bit frustrating if other countries came in and told Canada how to govern its own country. We understand this concern. However, when it gets to the point that what sovereign states are doing within that state is affecting the international stage, is affecting international security, that is when it's time to intervene or at least take some measures. For example, in Iran, I saw that you wanted to put the embassy back in Iran. How is that going to work to prevent their testing of nuclear weapons? If anything, they're just going to think that we're condoning their testing of nuclear weapons, which will eventually breach international security.
I think there's a difference between interfering with another country and providing aid to another country. I think that's an important separation. I think that Canada should continue its peacekeeping role it played in the past, and I think it should be committed to providing aid to other countries rather than just going in and trying to fix things, but going in to try to help and work alongside the governments in the sovereign states.
Alright, we're going to move on to the next question.
Okay, so this is a video, and the volume may not be very good, so I can reiterate what the voter is asking. So in case you couldn't hear, she's asking about First Nations and how your party would address the plight of First Nations people in Canada.
And Ms. Oriana, sir.
Alright. We believe that the First Nations are an incredible part of both Canada's culture and also part of its social structure as well. we also believe that the way that that the First Nations have been treated in their own reserves have not always been up to the Canadian standards we like to pretend we live by. We think that it's important for Canada to provide assistance rather than try to implicate itself necessarily into their own personal governing systems. I think it's important for us to provide training for their own leaders within their own communities and not necessarily to impose us foreigners in the way that they run their own minor governmental systems, but to help provide a structure and provide support for them should they need it.
So, as Ms. Oriano said, for much of Canadian history, the First Nation population has been living in extremely poor living conditions, and they've been faced with unequal treatment, and we're aware of this, and we can hear their frustration. We see their frustration most recently with the Idle No More movement, and what First Nations are asking, they're asking to be heard by the government, which current right-wing government is completely ignoring them. For example, by totally eliminating the Kelowna Accord, saying that he will find a new alternative, and not finding any alternative whatsoever. So we understand why the First Nations are frustrated, and we plan to shift towards self-governance and remove this ineffective and unaccountable Indian Act. The first thing we will do is remove the Indian Act. We will seek consultation and inclusion of First Nations on representative matters of the environment and social welfare, so that they feel like they have a seat at the table as well, because they do. And we will support the harvesting rights of First Nations, fishing and hunting, for example.
We believe that First Nations are a vital part of Canada's heritage, and we should support that heritage. We should take care of that heritage. We believe that First Nations heritage should be considered a part of Canadian culture, and that the federal government should take care of Native culture and provide money, small amounts of money to support Native cultural practices in the same way that we keep museums open. We also believe that creating special government designations for Natives simply contributes to discrimination against them and is in fact counterproductive in many ways. We believe that the Native people of Canada should be treated like any other group of Canadians, and that the best way to ensure a better future for the Natives is to ensure that they have the same future as every other Canadian.
Well, we also feel that the First Nations should be treated like any other Canadian citizen as well. However, they are the ones asking for self-governance, and it is simply impossible for the government to go in and kind of tell them how to live their lives, because they have their own cultures and traditions that we simply cannot understand. I mean, we're not saying that they should just implement their own whole new government, but we are supporting some sort of form of self-governance, sort of cater to their own sort of communities, like a little mini-municipal government.
We agree with a lot of what you said, Mr. Grenville, but it sort of feels as though you're talking as if they're museum pieces, and they're not. They're a vital part of our country, and studies show that in the reserves, First Nations are living more like people. They have living standards more like in the developing countries than in Canada. Their poverty rates are 40% higher than the rest of Canada, and pardon me. And in response to that, we are continuing to mess with their treaties to take away natural resources. I think it's important to talk to them. As Ms. Kim said, they want to talk with the government. They want to have a voice within the government. And I think as future governments, we should worry more about opening channels of communication with First Nations rather than putting them in a little box and saying we will treat them as we treat everybody else, which is fair. But I think they have been so misheard and so misrepresented that we should be opening channels of communication, and we should be dealing with them now and not continuing to put it off.
We believe that the Natives should be represented in the government, just like every group should be represented in the Canadian government. We believe that one of the chief causes of all this poverty in many extremely isolated reservations is basically their isolation and their lack of any, and their severe economic problems on those reservations. We believe that maybe a small amount of support for these reservations to help them develop economically would have significantly more effect on bettering conditions in isolated places like reserves than would simply by 10,000 special rights given by Ottawa. We also believe that the federal government should uphold contracts it has made in the past with Native groups, as they should uphold every contract they make with any member of the populace.
I mean, our party definitely agrees that we should be putting spending into the First Nations in order for them to have access to clean water, training of perhaps Aboriginal teachers, health services, economic development, etc. You did say that you wanted to put a fraction of spending into First Nations, but where are you going to get that spending from?
We believe that all isolated rural areas, which includes a large number of reserves, should get at least a little bit of federal assistance. We don't believe in the complete elimination of government and the complete elimination of taxes. We believe that it should be pared down to only what is necessary to help to keep Canada where it is, and that's it. We don't believe that it should be a large government, too small of a government or too large of a government, but it should be small enough to not infringe on Canadians, but to help them when they absolutely need it.
So you want a utopian government?
No, we want a government that can help, but doesn't control.
You want a government that's able to economically help,
But only very rarely. It doesn't need
very
to help
rarely,
all
so
the
you will only
time, so
very
it doesn't
rarely
need
be
all
helping the
sorts of
First
powers.
Nations. Will
We'll
you only very rarely be helping the First Nations?
be helping them as much as it would help anyone else who's in need.
Okay,
But the First Nations have special needs because they are in a lot worse economic and social situations than a lot of other Canadian fractions.
Any rural place that is as poor as reservations would be getting the same assistance. That's simple.
okay, we
Treat them
understand
like any
that,
other group.
but
And
we're
is
just
this
saying
monetary?
where's the money that your assistance will come from? I mean, if you're cutting all income tax, if you're reducing all your taxes, sales tax, property tax, where are you
Reducing
gonna
all of it.
corporate tax?
We're reducing, not
Where are you,
eliminating.
you're eliminating the income tax.
In your platform, you are eliminating income tax, you're eliminating the GST, and you're greatly reducing corporate taxes. The total revenue of the Canadian government is $245 billion, and you want to reduce it to $88 billion. How are you going to make up for the $271 billion worth of expenses that we have every year with an $88 billion budget?
Hold on.
Here we go. We'll do this quickly. This will be the last word, and then we'll.
Alright. We believe that cuts in other inefficient areas of government will mean that, thanks to the reduced role of government and its reduced spending for critical situations like this, there will still be some money available.
But if you're cutting income taxes and cutting GST and reducing corporate taxes, where are you getting this money from? Income tax is 49% of total government revenue.
You can't just eliminate wasteful spending. There isn't enough wasteful spending to be.
Perhaps your definition of wasteful spending is different from ours.
Okay,
Well,
then
are
what's
we
your
talking
definition of wasteful
infrastructure?
spending?
We're gonna move to the next question.
Perhaps this will add a little levity to the whole situation. So the question is directed at the New Generation Party, and it's how are you going to maintain levels of employment in Alberta given your proposal for a carbon tax?
So our proposal for a carbon tax, it's not for all Canadians, just to start off with, it's a cap and trade system, which essentially is putting a cap and a quota on carbon for corporations that can afford to be paying if they were to go over. So, as Mr. Granville said, we don't actually want to completely eliminate extraction of oil. I mean, as Canadians, we are blessed to be having all of these natural resources, and we will not stop extracting oil because right now it is one of our only means of economic growth. I mean, our natural resources are so vital, and the jobs that it produces are vital too, and therefore job growth in Alberta will not be affected necessarily.
What the community party believes is that it wouldn't really necessarily hurt the Albertans to lay down some kind of laws or restrictions, perhaps on maybe even car models or makes or years. We believe, based on some statistics, that older cars that have been not very well taken care of, they produce a lot of emissions, significantly more than newer modeled cars, which are geared for energy efficiency and just more green friendly. So we believe maybe putting a restriction or a tax on older modeled cars would maybe limit emissions and therefore, like, other automobile owners would still be able to drive without that kind of a tax, and then Albertans still get to sell their oil.
The problem with that is that older cars older, poorly maintained cars are disproportionately in the hands of people who simply don't have much money to spare for these taxes. Taxes exclusively on older, poorly maintained cars would just hurt the poor more than anyone else.
Well, a car should be maintained enough to be healthy and eco-friendly, not polluting the streets. So if there's a certain level of emission to where that neighborhood could be getting significantly more polluted, that community could be getting affected, then perhaps that would be an improvement on their standards of life, cleaner air in their areas. So then, therefore, it results in cheaper healthcare costs, because I'm sure they're going to be taking in a bunch of chemicals and bad stuff in the air. If all these people in poverty are driving these horrible cars, then these poverty places are just death traps with emissions killing everyone.
I think bringing it back to the carbon tax, that the revenue from the carbon tax can be used to fund efficient technology, as said, but also to generate renewable forms and to work and put more money into renewable forms of energy, and that does open up a whole new avenue of jobs without necessarily restricting jobs from the Albertans.
I mean, to say that implementing a carbon tax of any sort, so putting a price on carbon in any way, will hurt the economy, it's simply not true. I mean, there are examples of this working in the past or even right now. Like currently, the European Union has adopted a system very similar to the one that we are suggesting, which has been proven to be successful. Their carbon market is now worth $56 billion, and it's reduced greenhouse gas emissions by 50 to 100 million metric tons per year since 2005. So not only are they being environmentally conscious and environmentally sustainable, they have made billions, and with those billions, they are investing in renewable energy sources, renewable energy jobs, and this will not only improve the economy, it will improve job growth, and it will, in the long run, improve our environment.
And our resources are so important that excessive carbon emissions have had, in the past, a negative influence on these resources and will continue to do so. I think it's important to raise awareness, and not only raise awareness by saying that we need to raise awareness, but by implementing something that will raise awareness, because you can't ignore something such as a carbon tax. I think it's important in that aspect as well.
I mean, in the Liberty Party's platform, in your platform, Mr. Grenville, you say that putting a price on carbon would have no effect in the grand scheme of things. It will not alleviate any of the big problems of global climate change. Do you really believe that putting a price on carbon will not do anything whatsoever? It will not improve climate change in any way? I mean, it's proven to have worked in the European Union, but you think it won't work in Canada?
The European Union has achieved a reduction in their amount of carbon. The question is, how in terms of global carbon emissions, how much is the reduction that the EU had? Was it even a 1% reduction in the global emissions? The fact is, developing countries are producing the vast majority of these emissions, places like China and India, and they are not lining up to start carbon taxes. Canada is not a huge producer of these greenhouse gases. It is not. Therefore,
It's in the top 50 though.
Sure, it's in the top 50. There's probably not that many. There's probably only so many industrialized countries in the world that are producing large amounts of emissions. Naturally, as an industrialized country, would be in the top 50. That's not saying much.
So you think that Canada's environment is not destructive compared to many other countries?
I'd say that the effect on us would be much more limited than the effect on anybody else, and it's just not worth it.
I think the problem that both you and Ms. Kim are looking at is that you are continuously comparing Canada to other countries. I think it's important at some time to just do an inner reflection. Not everything that we do needs to be to put ourselves in a specific place above other countries. Some things we can do for ourselves, some things we must do for ourselves, and things such as reducing our carbon emissions are important for us and for our industry and for our exports and imports, and don't necessarily have to do with China.
The thing is, here in Canada, we predict that in the future nuclear power is inherently less expensive and more economical than coal. We predict that in a free energy market, companies would rather build nuclear plants than continue with coal and oil because it is cheaper for them. And that way, the free market would lead to a reduction in carbon emissions because they have chosen the more viable choice of nuclear power. So we don't necessarily believe that massive government intervention would be needed to create a reduction.
Okay. We'll move on to the next question. Oh. As a resident of Toronto, I am worried about the seemingly endless reports on the evening news about violent crime that often involves guns. What will your party do to make Canada a safer place?
We propose, among other things, restrictions on criminals and, well, first off, the reports of seemingly never-ending gun violence on the evening news are an illusion. There is less gun violence in the whole of Canada than there is in the city of Chicago in America, where handguns are completely banned. We don't believe that gun control is the solution to violence. We believe that gang control is the solution to violence. We believe in cutting the sources of revenue for organized crime and severely prosecuting organized criminals.
But you also say that you want to eliminate gun control. Do you
Yep.
think that will provide safer streets?
Well, look at it this way. Would you want to mug somebody if you think they might have a gun?
I think that's
If
a
I had a
little more
bigger gun,
candid
yeah.
than...
You want to bet your life on that?
I don't believe that eliminating all forms of gun control would be positive. I think that Canada's gun controls are...
Gun control really isn't.
sorry, I lost my line.
Gun control really isn't common sense. Right now, gun control is heavy and criminals are still armed and still shooting people. It's because they obtain their guns illegally, and there is no amount of gun control in the world that will prevent somebody from acquiring a gun
But
illegally.
eliminating all gun control just creates more of a problem. It creates more, even though it might be easy with gun control, or in some cases easy with gun control to attain weapons, I don't think eliminating gun control is the solution to that. I also think that it's better to prevent crime through like social programs and through youth programs, prevent crimes and prevent gang-related activity that way, than by eliminating gun control and saying we're all safe because we're too scared to shoot each other.
I mean,
It's
if
not
you're,
that
if you're
guns-
saying that more guns means less violent crime, then ask yourself, would you rather be punched in the face or would you rather be shot in the chest?
It's not that they'll shoot. It's not that they'll just punch you if they don't have a gun.
Okay,
They'll
but-
stab you or they'll buy a gun illegally and shoot you anyways.
It's not that easy to buy a gun illegally. If the gun control were to be eliminated, I mean, anyone can go and buy a gun, right? I mean, you only have a very basic safety test to acquire a weapon, am I correct?
And also a
I
criminal
mean, how
background check.
easy is it for someone to get a gun?
Statistically,
gun?
most murders are committed by people with a past violent criminal record.
Which
Okay.
is why we should be working on rehabilitating, especially for petty crimes, than trying to prevent by eliminating gun control.
And how are you going to ensure that people who aren't supposed to have guns won't have them? How will you ensure that without
ensure
being
that
the
now?
intrusive government that you don't want to be?
More people are killed in Canada by moose than they are by guns.
Yeah.
True story.
And before we implemented gun control in this country in 1978, that was still true. The point is, gun control hasn't necessarily helped Canada reduce its levels of criminal violence. It's not gun control that reduces criminal violence.
Then what does reduce criminal violence?
And I also just want to say
Cutting
that...
their revenue sources.
Okay, and most mass murder shooters have no criminal background whatsoever. So you could be selling guns to mass murder shooters and...
We've had, 2 mass murders in Canada?
Yeah, because there's gun control.
But they both, in the first case, the man had obtained a rifle, yes. And the trick was, he could have obtained a rifle illegally as well. And the second time, the person took a gun that was allowed under our current gun control scheme and shot people.
Was it his gun?
Yes, it was his gun under our current gun control scheme. Our current gun control scheme didn't prevent him from shooting anybody.
But if you look at the gun-related crime in Canada as opposed to other countries that don't have gun control, there's a much lower gun-related crime
Why don't
stat.
you look at our stats versus Switzerland? In Switzerland, everybody's in the military, everybody has an automatic rifle sitting in the back of their closet, and they still don't have any gun crime. That's because Switzerland doesn't have violent criminal culture.
Yes, but Switzerland also has a restriction on acquiring ammunition for the guns. Most of the guns are required to be unloaded. And it's a lot harder, though it is easier to get a gun in Switzerland, it's hard to get ammunition in Switzerland.
That's not entirely true. Any Swiss person with any sort of gun license, can just go down to a gun store and buy it.
And that's
No,
the
you need a
problem
special
exactly
license.
here in Canada. whether you're a criminal or an individual legally owning a gun, there's the chance of having a criminal break into your house to steal said legal gun. So then now you've got an increase in crime rate because people are breaking into houses for legal guns to steal, to sell on the street. So not only do you have them breaking into houses as a crime rate, but now you have more guns on the street.
So we should ban something because a criminal might steal it. Does that mean we should tell people don't keep any jewelry at home because criminals will steal it and sell it to buy things, to buy illegal items? Oh, that's silly.
So what is how do you explain this cutting off the revenue sources for gangs? If you're saying that gun control won't keep people safe, what will keep people safe?
Reducing the number of gang criminals on the streets. If gangs aren't able to make money
How?
through controlled prostitution, through the illegal controlled prostitution and the sale of drugs, then they won't be able to. Then there will reduce the reason for them to be violent against each other because they aren't fighting for control of those illegal revenue streams.
And how are you planning to keep them from fighting over control of those illegal revenue streams?
Because those revenue streams won't be exclusively the province of gangs anymore. If somebody can buy pot at a corner store, they're going to buy it from a gangster.
Gangs aren't making money from selling pot, they're making money from selling a lot of other more
But we also believe
difficult types of drugs.
We also believe in being tougher on those gangs which are still existing. Like, criminals can't shoot anybody if they're in prison.
Or dead, because you want to reintroduce capital punishment.
Yeah, that too. Although frankly, the people who would be punished under capital punishment wouldn't be getting out of prison really very often under current laws anyhow.
Why do you think that capital punishment is a correct way to defeat crimes?
Simply because some criminals have done things that are so terribly wrong and against humanity that they don't deserve to live.
And who gets to choose
That's
that?
why we believe in capital punishment. We believe capital punishment has to be selected at trial by a jury of these individuals' peers. It's a question of whether 12 of this person's peers believe their actions were so heinous that they deserve to die for it.
You say that you want a government to play a small role and that you want to introduce capital punishment?
The judge doesn't choose capital punishment. The judge is part of the government. The people, the jury, chooses whether or not capital punishment is relevant in the case.
Okay, and we're going to move on to the last question. I'm a young voter coming from a family of limited financial means who hopes to attend university in the near future. I must admit that I am very troubled by increasing tuition rates. What will your party do to help me attain the education I desire? Eva LaSalle, St. John's, Newfoundland.
Okay, so the Community Party has taken into consideration several things for both economic value and value in where our funding and money is going to support our Canadians. We believe that there should be, we're in support of a Canadian student loan forgiveness program, which is, it gives medical students, so medical doctors and practitioner nurses, and so that group of medical practitioners, when they're going in school, will rack up a lot of money in debt, and we're in support of this program, which gives $40,000 back over the course of 5 years to doctors and $20,000 over the course of 5 years to nurses. So as much as we would like to help out just regular university tuition, we find at the moment our money could be used better to support doctors and nurses and help Canadians through the healthcare system first.
Just want to say that with the average age of Canadians slowly getting older and older, and by 2040, 1/4 of the population will be over the age of 65, that means that opens up tons of opportunities for jobs, that opens up a necessity for jobs, and therefore education is the key to our successful future as a nation, as well as funding in education, because I mean, it's just a given fact that not everyone can afford post-secondary education, and that's why we understand the burden that students have for paying off their debts and just for paying off their tuition, which is why we will make student loans more accessible. We will keep the inflation of tuition low. We will continue to work with the provinces in funding education, But also, more importantly, once someone graduates from post-secondary education, they don't necessarily have the money to start paying off their loans right away. I mean, when interest starts piling up, they're not going to have the money for that, which is why we're proposing this wait time so that once you graduate, the government will assess your economic standing, and if you simply don't have the money to be paying off your loans, we will give you a break until you have that money.
The People's Benefit Party has many similar points in regard to education as the New Generation Party. We also plan on making post-secondary more affordable by stopping the inflation of tuition fees. Although we can't necessarily lower them, we can help prevent the inflation of them. And as Ms. Kim said, we have very similar points. We also believe that as the population ages, a lot of jobs in healthcare are opening up, and we want to provide assistance in that direction as well.
And I just want to say that in your platform you said that investing in post-secondary education only makes education more expensive. Is that what you're saying? Because of the supply and demand, because the government is providing subsidies and bursaries, education is becoming more expensive, and therefore the government shouldn't invest itself in education. Is that what you think?
We also believe that there should be, that post-secondary education that a university is not always the best option in terms of post-secondary education. We believe that that skilled trades and small businesses in Canada are valuable. We believe that people should take out loans and start small businesses instead of necessarily taking out a huge loan and going to university.
Well, we absolutely believe that too, but those loans need to be accessible. That money for those loans need to be there, and with your economic plan, that's not going to happen. The numbers aren't going to add up, and those loans won't be available. We're not saying that university is the only good alternative once you graduate from high school. There are tons of alternatives. Like you said, investing in small businesses, and we need to be providing loans for those small businesses.
Small businesses make up about half of the new jobs
Exactly,
in Canada.
and we simply won't have the money to be investing in those small businesses if we are reducing taxes by that much.
Okay. Okay, so we're going to move now to the closing statements. Each party will have 2 minutes. We're going to start with the New Generation Party.
So first off, I'd like to thank Humberside Collegiate for hosting our debate and Alex Hempel for acting as mediator. Each of the parties that have spoken today have a valiant goal in mind, improving the lives of Canadians. And for that, they must be applauded. What differentiates my friends and I is our means of improving Canada. Ms. Oriano and the People's Benefit Party pursue a reckless wave of change that is not fiscally realistic for Canada. Meanwhile, Mr. Grenville and the Liberty Party seek to take down every Canadian flag and replace it with the Star-Spangled Banner, with policies that will flood Canada with guns, executions of potentially wrongfully convicted criminals or offenders that can be rehabilitated, and tax slashes that will result in zero income for the federal government programs that aid Canadians. Frankly, the Tea Party, south of the border, would welcome them as one of their own. The New Generation Party does not seek tremendous yet unrealistic changes, nor do we wish to radically change Canada into America. Our platform simply seeks to increase the purchasing power of lower and middle class homes so that more money can be circulated within the economy. Further, we will be socially progressive with policies that will not break the bank, such as repealing the Indian Act, a progression towards a fair electoral system, and fresh positive view on foreign affairs. We acknowledge that Canada is already one of the best places in the world to live, but our ranking has been sinking, and lately we dropped out of the top 10. We are coming out of the economic recession, and so we can come out of our economic shelter and look back towards improving the lives of Canadians through acts that improve their health, education, and security. The New Generation Party and I ask you, the viewers, to recognize who stands before you. The People's Benefit Party wishes change, but the wish for it to happen too fast and in an unaffordable manner. And the Liberty Party wishes to scrap the idea of government and turn what's left of Canada's government into Washington North. We, the NGP, ask you to be bold and look to move Canada forward in the ever-advancing world by voting for our party on March 27th. Your voice matters, which is what makes Canada the great country it is, because ultimately the people are the power. Thank you.
Darius Jankitis, the Community Party.
So, being a member of a community requires hard work from everyone. It means that your neighbor John doesn't keep his 1970 fixer-upper running while emissions are going into the atmosphere. It means that we spend equal amounts on our grandparents as well as tomorrow's children for an equal future for everyone. It means that we should perhaps rethink about our approach on gun laws, maybe even attacking the source, as a large number of the guns come from the States. So maybe tighten restrictions on the border or a law to prevent criminals from importing guns by raising the penalties. In regards to Native, the First Nations, as Ms. Kim said, we're talking about a renewable type of support in which we could perhaps go in league with the chiefs or people in authority and help them schedule programs to reteach cultural traditions such as fishing or hunting, and that way that can reduce our government spending on First Nations. They will be more equipped to handle their conditions. And the community party would just like for all the provinces to work together and kind of equalize spending throughout all of Canada and make sure everyone gets an equal slice.
The People's Benefit Party of Canada, Claudia Orellana.
My name is Claudia Orellana, and I'm the leader of the People's Benefit Party of Canada. I'd like to thank Humberside Collegiate Institute, Mr. Dingwall, Mr. Alex Hempel, Ms. Juliana, whose last name I unfortunately can't remember. Berger. I knew that. As well as all my fellow leaders, Ms. Kim, Mr. Jankitis, and Mr. Grenville. The People's Benefit Party understands that Canada is a growing and changing environment. If we are elected, we promise to provide a transparent government dedicated to social progress. Together we can make Canada a country we are proud to live in. A country where social programs are available to all. A country where you can grow old without worrying about growing poor. A country where the government never puts itself before the needs of its people. Together we can make this Canada a reality. A vote for me on March 27th is a vote in the right direction. Thank you.
And Cameron Grenville of the Canadian Liberty Party.
We at the Canadian Liberty Party believe that the best future for Canada, the only real future for Canada, is in liberty for the people. We believe that Canada must become a more free country. Canada must free itself economically if Canada is to succeed in the future. We believe that that Canada is a great country, and it can only become greater if you vote for us. We believe that less government is better. We believe Canada needs freedom to succeed in the future. We believe that a vote for us is a vote for freedom and a vote for a better world and a better Canada.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you, everybody, for watching and for participating in the debate. It was a great debate, and hopefully the election goes well in the future.